The massive alien assembly hall stretched for miles in every direction, filled with creatures that looked like they came from humanity's worst nightmares and wildest dreams. Some beings floated in glass tanks filled with purple gas, while others stood on 6 legs with crystals growing from their heads. The air buzzed with strange sounds as thousands of different species communicated in ways humans could never imagine. At the center of this cosmic gathering, a huge holographic display showed Earth spinning slowly like a child's toy. The planet looked so small and insignificant compared to the enormous alien structures surrounding it. Earth was just another item on their long list of worlds to review, marked simply as World 2753 in their records. Council Speaker Vexmore, a tall creature, with skin like liquid metal, raised one of his 4 arms to silence the crowd. His voice boomed through the hall using technology that translated his words into every alien language present. He began reading from a glowing tablet that floated beside him, his tone already showing how little he thought of the small blue world. World 2753 continues to display the same primitive behaviors we observed during their last evaluation, Vexmore announced, his metallic face showing what could only be described as disgust. These humans have managed to place a few of their kind on their natural satellite, but they still cannot travel beyond their own solar system. They remain trapped by their own technological limitations. The alien audience made various sounds of amusement. Some clicked their mandibles, others released gas clouds that changed color, and a few mechanical beings produced electronic beeping that somehow conveyed laughter. Vexmore continued his report, each word dripping with contempt. More concerning is their inability to unite as a species. While most civilized worlds achieve planetary unity within centuries of discovering fire, humans continue to divide themselves into hundreds of separate groups called nations. These nations regularly engage in armed conflicts over basic resources that any advanced civilization would have learned to share or synthesize. The floating display zoomed in on Earth, showing real-time images of human cities, farms, and unfortunately, areas where conflicts were happening. The aliens watched with the same fascination that humans might watch ants fighting over crumbs. Their violent tendencies appear to be genetic, Vexmore added, manipulating the display to show historical footage of human wars throughout the centuries. From primitive clubs and spears to nuclear weapons, they have consistently chosen conflict as their primary method of problem-solving. They even point these weapons at each other, threatening their own extinction. A creature that looked like a walking tree raised one of its branch-like arms. Speaker Vexmore, surely they must show some positive development. Even the most primitive species usually evolve past constant warfare. Vexmore's metallic face somehow managed to look even more disgusted. Unfortunately, no. If anything, they have become more efficient at destroying each other. They have weapons capable of ending all life on their planet, yet they build more of them every year. They poison their own air and water while fighting over territory. They cannot even agree on how to manage their planet's climate, despite clear evidence that their industrial activities are making their world less habitable. The hall filled with various alien expressions of disbelief and disappointment. Some species had dealt with primitive worlds before, but few had encountered such a stubborn case of self-destructive behavior. "What is the Council's recommendation?" asked a voice from somewhere in the crowd. Vexmore touched his tablet, and the display changed to show a red barrier surrounding Earth's solar system. "We will extend the quarantine field for another 1,000 Earth years. Perhaps by then, these humans will have either learned to civilize themselves or eliminated their own species through their violent tendencies. Either outcome would be preferable to allowing them to spread their destructive nature to other worlds." The vote was swift and unanimous. Thousands of alien representatives agreed without debate. Earth would remain isolated, cut off from the galactic community like a dangerous infection that needed to be contained. But Vexmore was not finished with his humiliation. He activated Earth's primitive communication networks, hijacking every radio signal, television broadcast, and internet connection on the planet simultaneously. His image appeared on every screen, his translated voice speaking in every human language. "Humans of World 2753, he began, his tone now openly mocking. Your species has once again failed to meet the minimum standards required for galactic citizenship. Perhaps when you learn to govern yourselves without resorting to violence every few years, when you can solve problems without pointing weapons at each other, and when you finally understand that cooperation is superior to competition, you might be worthy of joining civilized society. The transmission ended with the sound of alien laughter, echoing across every human communication device on Earth, leaving 8 billion people staring at their screens in stunned silence, finally understanding that they were not alone in the universe, and that they were considered nothing more than a cosmic joke. Dr. Kim Ji-won sat in her cluttered Seoul laboratory at 3 a.m, surrounded by towers of computer equipment that hummed and blinked in the darkness. She had been working on decoding unusual signals from space for months, thinking they might be natural phenomena or perhaps distant pulsars. But as the alien transmission played back through her speakers, her coffee mug slipped from her trembling hands and shattered on the floor. The metallic voice speaking in perfect Korean made her blood run cold. These weren't random signals from space. This was a deliberate message from beings who had been watching humanity for thousands of years, treating Earth like some kind of cosmic zoo exhibit. Her hands shook as she replayed the transmission, each word hitting her like a physical blow. Ji-won immediately began uploading the decoded transmission to every major news network, government database, and social media platform she could access. Her fingers flew across multiple keyboards as she bypassed security systems and pushed the alien message to every corner of the internet. She knew that once this information got out, there would be no going back for humanity. Within the first hour, the transmission had spread across South Korea like wildfire. People gathered around televisions in restaurants, coffee shops, and subway stations, their faces showing the same mixture of shock and disbelief that Ji-won had felt. The aliens' mocking words played on every channel, translated into Korean, English, Chinese, and dozens of other languages. By the second hour, the news had reached every major capital on Earth. In Washington, generals who had spent their careers preparing for conflicts with China and Russia suddenly found themselves staring at screens showing an entirely different kind of threat. In Beijing, military commanders who had been planning strategies against American forces were now calculating how to defend against enemies from beyond the stars. The psychological impact hit different people in different ways. Some humans fell into despair, realizing that their entire species was seen as nothing more than violent animals by advanced civilizations. Others felt overwhelming shame at how humanity must appear to these cosmic observers. But for many, especially those in positions of power, the alien message triggered something much more dangerous than sadness or embarrassment. It triggered rage. General Park Min-soo was in the middle of a strategy meeting about North Korean missile capabilities when his aide burst into the room with a tablet showing the alien transmission. As he watched the metallic creature mock humanity's violent nature and primitive technology, something fundamental shifted in his worldview. The North Korean threat that had dominated his thinking for decades suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the cosmic insult that had just been delivered to his entire species. Within 6 hours of the transmission's release, Park Min-soo had abandoned his post at the Korean Defense Ministry and was on a military transport plane heading to a location that officially didn't exist. The emergency meeting had been arranged through back channels that connected former enemies who now shared a common purpose that transcended all previous conflicts. The secret facility buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps had been built during the Cold War as a neutral meeting place for nuclear powers. It had been used only twice in its 50-year history, both times to prevent global thermonuclear war. Now it hosted the most important gathering in human history, though none of the participants had slept in the past 24 hours. American. Admiral Lee Subin arrived first, her usual composed demeanor cracked by the magnitude of what humanity had just learned. She had spent her career commanding nuclear submarines designed to counter Russian naval forces, but now she found herself shaking hands with Russian Colonel Nam Hyuk, a man whose forces she had been trained to destroy. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Here they were, representatives of nations that had spent trillions of dollars preparing to fight each other, now sitting around the same table because an alien council had called them too violent and primitive for galactic society. They want to see us as united, Nam Hyok said in heavily accented English, his weathered face showing a grim smile. Perhaps it's time we showed them what human unity actually looks like. As more military leaders arrived from around the world, Dr. Kim Ji-won was making an even more disturbing discovery back in her Seoul laboratory. Using the same techniques that had decoded the alien transmission, she had detected something else that had been hidden from human sensors for millennia. The quarantine field was real and it was massive. It surrounded their entire solar system like an invisible prison wall, blocking not just physical travel, but also most forms of communication with the outside galaxy. Humanity hadn't failed to detect alien civilizations because they were too far away. They had failed to detect them because they were being deliberately isolated, kept in cosmic quarantine like a dangerous disease that might infect the rest of the galaxy. The realization spread through the emergency meeting like electricity. Humanity wasn't just being mocked by aliens. They were being imprisoned by them, treated like dangerous animals that needed to be kept in cages for the safety of everyone else. For the first time in human history, every major military power on Earth began working toward the same goal, united by a shared humiliation that burned deeper than any previous conflict they had fought against each other. The abandoned missile silos that had once held humanity's most destructive weapons were now buzzing with activity that would have been impossible to imagine just months earlier. Deep beneath the frozen plains of Montana, what had once been a nuclear launch facility was being transformed into something entirely different. Teams of engineers and scientists worked around the clock, dismantling warheads that had been designed to destroy cities and converting them into the power sources for humanity's most ambitious project. Dr. Kim Ji-won stood in the center of what used to be Launch Control Room 7, surrounded by equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Banks of quantum processors hummed quietly as they processed calculations that would have taken traditional computers decades to complete. The breakthrough had come to her during a sleepless night 3 weeks after the alien transmission, when she realized that the same quantum entanglement principles the aliens used for their faster-than-light communication could be reverse-engineered from the transmission itself. The connection is stable across all test sites, she reported into her headset, watching as data streams flowed between underground facilities scattered across 6 continents. Her quantum communication network allowed teams in Russia, China, America, and Korea to work together as if they were in the same room, sharing information instantly across thousands of miles. In the depths of the Siberian facility that had once housed Soviet ICBMs, Russian engineers were solving problems that would have taken years of international cooperation during peacetime. Colonel Nam Hyok watched as his team completed the fusion drive assembly for what would become Terra Hyok, named after him despite his protests. The drive system used principles stolen from the alien transmission, combined with human nuclear, technology that had been refined through decades of building weapons capable of ending civilization. The efficiency readings are beyond anything we theorized, reported Chief Engineer Volkov, his eyes bloodshot from weeks of 18-hour workdays. If the calculations are correct, this single drive can accelerate a ship to speeds that would make interplanetary travel possible in days rather than months. Meanwhile, in the converted submarine facility beneath the Korean peninsula, teams were working on what many considered the most crucial aspect of the project. The biotechnology, originally developed for enhancing soldiers in combat, was being adapted for the hostile environment of deep space. General Park Min-soo had volunteered for the first round of human trials, allowing scientists to modify his reflexes, bone density, and blood chemistry to handle the extreme forces of space combat. The enhancement process is uncomfortable but effective, he reported to Admiral Lee Subin via quantum communication. My reaction time has improved by 40%, and the bone-strengthening treatments mean I can handle G-forces that would have killed me before. More importantly, the neural interface allows direct connection with ship systems, making human-machine cooperation seamless. The construction of the actual vessels was happening in facilities so secret that most government officials didn't know they existed. Massive underground caverns had been excavated beneath mountain ranges, their entrances disguised as mining operations or geological research stations. Inside these hidden spaces, ships were taking shape that combined human engineering with alien technology principles decoded from the transmission. Each vessel was designed with one purpose in mind: to be absolutely terrifying to encounter in space. The hulls were sleek and predatory, painted in matte black to absorb sensor scans. Weapon systems were integrated seamlessly into the ship structure, giving them the appearance of dangerous sea creatures rather than traditional spacecraft. The Alien Council had called humanity violent and primitive, so humanity decided to embrace that reputation completely. Admiral Lee Subin spent most of her time in the American facility, overseeing the construction of Terra Subin while coordinating with similar projects worldwide. The ship was massive by human standards but would appear small and fast compared to the enormous alien vessels they had seen in the transmission. Speed and unpredictability would be humanity's advantages against beings who had grown comfortable with thousands of years of galactic peace. Every system has multiple backups, she explained to the international team of engineers. These ships need to function perfectly even if half their components are destroyed. We're not building exploration vessels or diplomatic ships. We're building weapons that can survive in hostile space and deliver overwhelming force when necessary. The secrecy was absolute. Above ground, Earth appeared to continue its normal activities. News reports discussed the usual political conflicts, economic problems, and social issues that had always dominated human attention. Satellite imagery showed the same cities, the same traffic patterns, the same signs of a divided species struggling with internal conflicts. But beneath the surface, something unprecedented was happening. Former enemies were sharing their most classified technologies. Russian nuclear experts worked alongside American missile specialists. Chinese quantum physicists collaborated with Korean biotechnology researchers. Military commanders who had spent their careers preparing to fight each other were now planning joint operations against an enemy none of them had imagined possible. Dr. Kim Ji-won's quantum communication network meant that every breakthrough at one facility was instantly shared with all others. When the Chinese team discovered a more efficient way to focus plasma weapons, the information appeared on screens in Russian and American facilities within seconds. When Korean scientists perfected the human enhancement process, teams worldwide began implementing the improvements immediately. The timeline was impossibly ambitious. The Alien Council had given humanity another 1,000 years of quarantine, but the human leadership had decided that waiting was not an option. Every day of continued isolation was another day of cosmic humiliation, another day of being treated like dangerous animals in a cage. As the first completed vessels rolled out of their underground construction bays, each one carried inscriptions in every human language that had ever existed. The words varied by culture and dialect, but the message was universal. Never underestimate the cornered. Captain Kim Ji-won gripped the command chair of Terra Minsu as her ship approached the invisible wall that had imprisoned humanity for 8,000 years. Through the view screen, space looked perfectly normal, filled with distant stars and the familiar glow of their sun behind them. But every sensor on the ship screamed warnings about the massive energy field that surrounded their entire solar system like a cosmic cage. All ships report ready for synchronized attack, came the voice of Admiral Lee Subin through the quantum communication system. Her ship, Terra Subin, was positioned on the opposite side of the solar system, along with 99 other vessels spread across 17 different attack points. The plan was audacious and had never been attempted by any species in galactic history. Ji-won had spent months calculating the exact frequencies needed to destabilize the quarantine barrier. The alien transmission that had started this whole journey contained more information than the Galactic Council had intended to share. Hidden within their mocking message were the harmonic signatures of their own technology, like a burglar accidentally dropping their keys while breaking into a house. "Harmonic resonance weapons charging to full power," reported her weapons officer, Lieutenant Park Dae-ho, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to operate the complex alien-derived systems with superhuman precision. The biotechnology modifications had been painful, but they allowed human crews to interface directly with their ships in ways that made them faster and more responsive than any alien pilot. Around the solar system, 300 human ships prepared to attempt something that galactic physicists had declared impossible. The quarantine barriers were designed by a civilization thousands of years ahead of humanity, using technology that should have been incomprehensible to a species that had barely reached their own moon just decades earlier. But the aliens had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated human stubbornness and the species' talent for turning any technology into a weapon. All ships, commence attack in 3, 2, 1, execute, Jiwan commanded. The assault began simultaneously across 17 different points around the solar system's edge. Each group of ships fired their harmonic resonance weapons at precisely calculated frequencies, creating a coordinated attack that no single civilization had ever attempted. The barrier had been designed to withstand conventional attacks, energy, weapons, and even the gravitational forces of collapsing stars. But it had never been designed to handle a coordinated harmonic assault from multiple vectors simultaneously. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The energy beams from the human ship struck the invisible barrier and appeared to be absorbed harmlessly, just as the alien designers had intended. But Jiwan watched her instruments carefully, seeing the subtle changes in energy readings that indicated their attack was working exactly as planned. "Resonance cascade beginning," she announced to the fleet. "All ships maintain fire and prepare for barrier collapse." The effect started small, like tiny cracks appearing in a sheet of ice. The quarantine barrier began to vibrate at frequencies that matched the human weapons, and those vibrations spread outward from each impact point. When the vibrations from different attack groups met and reinforced each other, something extraordinary happened. Space itself appeared to crack. The barrier became visible for the first time in 8,000 years as massive fractures of pure energy spiderwebbed across the invisible wall. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, like watching reality itself break apart. Sheets of crackling energy peeled away from the barrier, like paint flaking off an old wall, revealing the true scale of humanity's prison for the first time. "My God," whispered someone over the communication channel. The barrier stretched for billions of miles in every direction, a perfect sphere that had enclosed not just Earth but their entire solar system. Humanity had never been alone because they couldn't find other life. They had been alone because other life had been deliberately kept away from them. The cascade failure accelerated rapidly once it began. The alien technology that powered the barrier was incredibly advanced, but it relied on perfect stability to function. The coordinated human attack had introduced chaos into a system designed for absolute order, and that chaos spread through the barrier's energy matrix like a virus. "Barrier integrity dropping rapidly," reported Lieutenant Park. "We're seeing cascade failures across all sections. The entire structure is becoming unstable." Captain Jiwan watched in amazement as cracks of pure energy spread across space faster than light itself, connecting all 17 attack points in a web of destruction that encompassed their entire solar system. The sight was like watching the birth of a new galaxy, with streams of liberated energy painting space in colors that human eyes had never seen before. Then, with a flash that lit up every sensor in the human fleet, the 8,000-year-old quarantine barrier collapsed completely. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in millennia, Earth's solar system was open to the galaxy. Radio signals that had been blocked for thousands of years suddenly burst outward at light speed, carrying news of humanity's existence to civilizations that had forgotten. Earth even existed, but the human fleet didn't pause to celebrate. The moment the barrier fell, 300 ships engaged their fusion drives and poured through the breach like water through a broken dam. Their destination was clear: the Galactic Council's monitoring stations that had been watching Earth's prison for centuries. The ships moved faster than Council physicists believed possible, their quantum communication systems invisible to alien sensors that had been designed to detect conventional technology. They scattered in all directions, some heading for Council military bases, others targeting civilian colonies, and still others racing toward the alien homeworlds themselves. When the nearest Council patrol ships arrived at Earth's location to investigate the impossible energy readings their sensors had detected, they found only empty space filled with the dissipating remains of their ancient barrier. The small blue planet and its primitive inhabitants were nowhere to be seen, vanished into the galaxy like ghosts seeking revenge. In the depths of space, Captain Kim Ji-won smiled grimly as Terra Minsu accelerated toward its target. The Galactic Council had called humanity violent and primitive. Now they were about to discover exactly how dangerous those qualities could be when combined with alien technology and 8,000 years of suppressed rage. The hunt had begun. The Galactic Council's emergency assembly was in complete chaos. Representatives from 1,000 different species filled the massive chamber, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, electronic beeps, and telepathic static. Council Speaker Vexmore was struggling to maintain order as reports flooded in from across the galaxy about impossible energy readings and the complete destruction of an 8,000-year-old quarantine system. "This is clearly some kind of natural phenomenon," insisted Ambassador Kreltak from the hegemony worlds, his crystalline faceplates reflecting the emergency lighting that had been activated throughout the chamber. "Primitive species cannot simply destroy Council technology. The barrier around World 2753 must have suffered some kind of structural failure." But even as he spoke, more disturbing reports were arriving. Council monitoring stations throughout the local sector had gone dark one by one, their final transmissions showing brief glimpses of sleek unknown vessels moving at impossible speeds. Trade routes that had operated safely for millennia were reporting mysterious ship sightings that vanished before patrol vessels could investigate. Suddenly, every screen in the assembly hall flickered and went black. The Council's most secure communication channels, protected by quantum encryption that had never been broken, were displaying the same message. "Incoming transmission, priority override, source unknown." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber as the screens lit up with the image of a human face. Admiral Park Min-soo appeared larger than life on displays throughout the hall, his expression calm but carrying an intensity that made even the most confident council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Greetings, Galactic Council," he began, his voice speaking in perfect galactic standard despite the fact that humans supposedly had no knowledge of the language. "I am Admiral Park Min-soo, representing the unified forces of humanity. We received your message." The chamber erupted in disbelief. Council Speaker Vexmore activated his personal communication device, frantically trying to cut the transmission, but nothing responded. The human had complete control over their most secure systems. "You may remember us," Park continued, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "World 2753, the primitive, violent species that you deemed unworthy of galactic society. The ones you locked in a cage like dangerous animals while you laughed at our conflicts and divisions." Behind him, tactical displays began appearing on every screen in the chamber. The images showed something that should have been impossible. Human vessels surrounding major council installations throughout the galaxy, sleek predatory ships hung in space around heavily defended military bases, trade hubs, and even the homeworlds of several council species. "We want to thank you for the education," Park said, his tone becoming colder. "Your transmission taught us so much about galactic politics, about advanced technology, and most importantly, about how the so-called civilized species of the galaxy view those they consider beneath them." Ambassador Kreltak was frantically working his control panel, trying to activate emergency protocols, but every system in the chamber remained under human control. "This is impossible," he muttered to his aide. "They cannot have developed this level of technology in just months. They barely had interplanetary travel." As if hearing his words, Admiral Park's expression grew more serious. "You assumed that because we fight among ourselves we are weak. You thought that our divisions made us vulnerable, but you made a critical error in your assessment of humanity." The tactical displays shifted, showing more human ships decloaking around council positions. The vessels appeared to be everywhere at once, as if they had been planning this moment for years rather than months. "You forgot that a species forged in constant warfare develops certain advantages," Park continued. "We understand strategy in ways that peaceful civilizations cannot comprehend. We know how to turn any technology into a weapon. We excel at finding weaknesses in systems that others consider impregnable." The chamber had fallen completely silent. Even the species that communicated through chemical releases or electromagnetic fields had stopped their constant background chatter. Every representative was focused on the human admiral, whose image dominated their screens. But most importantly, Park said, his voice now carrying the weight of 8 billion angry humans, you underestimated what happens when you unite a warlike species against a common enemy. For the first time in our history, humanity has stopped fighting each other. Every weapon we built to destroy ourselves has been turned outward. Every tactical genius who spent their career planning to defeat other humans is now focused on a single target. The displays around the chamber shifted again, showing human ships in positions that would allow them to cripple galactic trade, communication, and military response within hours. The scope of the deployment was staggering. Just months. Humanity had positioned forces throughout Council space with precision that suggested decades of planning. We are not here to destroy your civilizations, Park stated clearly. Despite what you believe about our violent nature, we are not interested in conquest or genocide. We simply want what every sentient species deserves: recognition, respect, and the right to exist as equals in galactic society. He paused, letting his words sink in before delivering the ultimatum that would change galactic politics forever. You have 72 hours to formally recognize humanity as a full member of galactic civilization. All quarantine barriers around human space will be permanently removed. All restrictions on human expansion and development will be lifted, and you will publicly acknowledge that your previous assessment of our species was incorrect. The tactical displays showed countdown, timers appearing next to every human ship position, all synchronized to the same deadline. If these terms are not met, Admiral Park concluded, his expression becoming grim, you will discover exactly what 8,000 years of contained human innovation can accomplish when given proper motivation. We are a species that learned to split atoms for the purpose of ending civilizations. We have had millennia to imagine what we might do to enemies who kept us caged. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Galactic Council chamber in stunned silence. On every screen, the countdown continued ticking away, marking the time remaining before humanity's patience ran out. For the first time in galactic history, the advanced civilizations that had ruled space for millennia found themselves staring at an ultimatum from a species they had dismissed as primitive animals. And as reports continued flooding in about human ships appearing around critical installations throughout the galaxy, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of galactic politics, and the Council had less than 3 days to decide how to respond.